After export audio, we have recent files. So I can see all the recent projects I've loaded in the past, and they'll appear here. Now below that we have audio and MIDI settings. So I click on this, and we'll see this audio and MIDI settings box here, right? And you notice it says audio here. I'm using a Mac, so I have a core audio system running, built-in input, or I can use my Pro Tools aggregate I/O. I also have a status, it's running, and we have our sample rate. So here for a sample rate, it could be either 44.1, 48, 88.2, or 96K. Now the higher the sample rate, the larger the files will be. Be really big files because they require so much hard drive space to create these big files. So be aware of that too as well. And here we have our latency. So in case you're recording audio and back and forth, sometimes you're going to have this latency where it's going to take some time for it to process the data and then play it back for you. We'll cover more of this as we do sampling, but it's important to realize we can change and set the latency value. So here, for example, it's 512, right? I can move here and move it right down. So you'll notice here the input now is at 6.3 at 256 samples. And that's seconds here. Got that? These are milliseconds. This is a processing of 5.8 milliseconds. And the output is within 0.7 milliseconds. So the overall is 12.8 milliseconds. Got that? That's the overall latency We'll cover more of this as we record audio in using sampling, but it's important to understand where it is in our file menu. Now we also have routing here. So this is a routing of the inputs and outputs within the machine, as you can see here. And we can scroll down here. But currently, I'm just using outputs 1 and 2. Make it simple for the session. Now next we have MIDI. We have MIDI input and MIDI outputs. So here we have a device and status. And I have a MIDI controller. I have MIDI input port 0, MIDI controller, virtual input, and machine 2 virtual input. I can change my status here from on to off. And we'll cover more of that as we get into using our MIDI. We'll put a MIDI cable in and show you how it works. But it's important to understand where it's at in our file menu. Now the next options we have are sync to external MIDI clock and send MIDI clock. Now, syncing to an external MIDI device means that machine is going to send MIDI clock information and tell machine when to start and stop. It will control it. So I'll select sync to external MIDI clock, and you'll notice here now all we have is a record button, and we can't even play. Nothing we can do here. We press record, and the machine is going to control the MIDI input into machine, which could be an MPC or an MV8000, and I press play there, and then the software will start. So I can go back here to File, I'll select Sync to external MIDI clock and turn it off, because you notice a check mark is there already. Now there's no more check mark, as you'll see, and now we have back to the top, we have our play to stop, and we have our record. Now, we go here again, and we have send MIDI clock. So machine software can send the MIDI clock data, saying that, okay, we're going to start here from the first measure. No, we'll start from the second measure. Wherever I'm at, I can say I'm starting from here, and that device that I'm synced to will say, okay, right, I'll start from right where you're starting. So it's going to slave the other device to machine's MIDI clock.